how does a children's story, one famously written on napkins in a coffee shop, become one of the biggest cultural phenomena in modern history? I mean, we're talking about a success so massive, it actually coined its own term, Harry Potterization. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and figure out exactly how that magic really happened.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this thing. Then, we'll introduce the main tool we'll be using for our investigation, Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point theory. After that, we'll apply its 3 rules directly to the wizarding world, dig into why the story itself was just so darn compelling, and finally, see how they kept that magical momentum going for years and years.
All right, first things first, we need to establish just how enormous this whole thing became. We're not just talking about a best-selling book series. We're talking about a global brand that literally reshaped entire industries, from publishing to filmmaking.
And if you want proof, just look at the numbers. The very first movie raked in almost $1 billion. $1 billion. That's not just a hit movie. That's an amount of money that rivals the entire economy of some small countries. And it wasn't a fluke. Look at the next films. They all kept up that insane pace. This wasn't some slow burn success story. This was a straight-up explosion right from the start.
So that leads us to the real question, right? How on earth did a story about a lonely kid living in a cupboard under the stairs completely take over the world? You know, it's easy to just say, oh, it had good marketing, or it's just a good story. But that doesn't explain this kind of explosive viral spread. There had to be a specific moment, a tipping point, where it went from being a popular book to a full-blown global obsession. To find that moment, we're going to borrow a framework from author Malcolm Gladwell and his brilliant theory of the tipping point. It's really the perfect lens for understanding how seemingly small things can suddenly make a huge, huge difference.
Gladwell calls the tipping point that magic moment. It's not a slow, gradual climb to popularity. It's a sudden, dramatic spike where an idea just erupts. Think about it like a virus. It spreads quietly for a while, and then suddenly it hits a critical mass and becomes an epidemic. Well, Gladwell argues that ideas can do the exact same thing.
So how does an idea actually tip? Gladwell says it's not just random luck. It needs 3 very specific things to happen. He calls them the law of the few, the stickiness factor, and the power of context. If you can get all 3 of those ingredients just right, you don't just have a popular trend on your hands, you have a true phenomenon.
Okay, so let's put this theory to the test. Let's see how these 3 rules apply to the Harry Potter universe. We're going to start with that first one, the law of the few.
The law of the few basically says that big trends aren't started by everybody at once. They're actually ignited by a very small group of very specific people who are just naturally exceptional at getting a message out there.
Now, these key people tend to fall into 3 groups. You've got your connectors. They're the social butterflies who seem to know everyone. Then you have the mavens. They're the experts, the ones who are always in the know and love to share what they've learned. But for turning a story into a global brand, the most important role might just belong to the salesmen. These are the charismatic, persuasive people who can sell an idea to anyone.
So who were the salesmen for Harry Potter? Well, at the top of the list, you have J.K. Rowling herself. She was the ultimate persuader through her incredible storytelling. Then, you've got her publishers, Scholastic and Bloomsbury, who were absolute masters at building that grassroots hype. And then, of course, the mega salesman, Warner Brothers, who took this brand and just amplified it into a global entertainment machine.
Okay, on to rule number 2, the power of context. This idea is simple, but so powerful. It says that the environment, the time, the place, the culture, where a message is received is just as important as the message itself. And even the tiniest tweak to that context can have an absolutely massive impact. And I've got the perfect example of this in action. In the UK, the first book was called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But when it came time to release it in the United States, the publisher made what seems like a small change, but it was actually a genius move. So why did they change it? Well, Scholastic, the American publisher, made a calculated bet. They believed that for their target audience, American kids, the word philosopher sounded kind of boring, maybe a little academic. But sorcerer? That sounded exciting, action-packed, and full of magic. It's a perfect, almost surgical example of tweaking the context to make sure the message would land with the biggest possible splash.
Okay, so we've got the right people and the right context. But that brings us to the third and maybe the most crucial rule of all, the stickiness factor. What was it about the actual story itself that made it so powerful and unforgettable?
The stickiness factor is that special something, that secret sauce in a message that makes it impossible to shake. It's the quality that makes you not only remember an idea, but feel an almost urgent need to tell someone else about it. And for Harry Potter, the secret to its stickiness can be summed up in one word: contrast.
The story starts in the most painfully ordinary, aggressively normal world you can imagine. The Dursleys hate anything weird, anything mysterious. They are the living definition of unmagical. And this, it turns out, is the perfect setup.
Because then, into this drab, gray, suburban world, you start to get these little cracks where pure magic shines through. A cat reading a map, an invasion of owls delivering letters. It creates this incredible, irresistible tension between the boring world we all know and a secret, extraordinary one that's hiding just out of sight.
And it all builds to this one iconic line. After all that oppressive normalcy, this is the catharsis. It's one of the most powerful and sticky ideas in all of modern literature because it's the ultimate wish fulfillment fantasy. It's a message that tells every single person reading it, hey, you might feel ordinary on the outside, but secretly, you're special, you're magical. And that idea is impossible to forget.
But look, having a tipping point is one thing. Staying on top of the world for more than a decade is something else entirely. So once the phenomenon hit, how did they keep that incredible momentum from fizzling out?
Well, there were really 4 key engines that kept the Hogwarts Express chugging along at full speed. First, you had the multiplier effect. Every book led to a movie, which led to video games and toys and theme parks. It created this massive, self-sustaining economic universe. Second was corporate control. Warner Bros. Was incredibly smart and selective about who they licensed the brand to. This kept Harry Potter feeling special and premium, not cheap. Third, the rise of the digital community. The internet was exploding, which let fans connect, form communities, and keep the magic alive online in between books and movies. And finally, they had a steady drip of constant content, spin-off books, interviews, promotions that made sure Harry Potter was never ever out of the conversation.
And in the end, it all comes back to this mind-boggling number. The success wasn't an accident. It wasn't just luck. It was the perfect storm of the right people delivering an irresistibly sticky message in exactly the right context.
All of which makes you wonder, right? When you look around at the trends and stories that are catching on today, can you spot those 3 rules at play? Can you see the law of the few, the power of context, and that all-important stickiness factor? What do you think will be the next big thing to tip?